All right, we have 4:32, so we'll get into it. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Mark Phillips, and I'm the Director of Protective Services with the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District, and I will be facilitating this virtual town hall. We're here this afternoon to share information and answer questions about the Place Glacier Outburst flood hazard, the work that the SLRD and Stantec have been undertaking to understand and address this hazard, and next steps as we move into the next phase of hazard planning and mitigation option development. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are meeting virtually from many different places. Wherever you're joining from, please take a moment to recognize the traditional and unceded territories on which you reside. Specifically, this afternoon, we acknowledge the Lillooet Nation and the Quaqua, whose lands are directly affected by this hazard, and their knowledge and expertise continue to guide this important work. A few quick notes about how we'll be using Microsoft Teams tonight. So please keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking. You're welcome to turn on your camera. It helps make the discussion more engaging. We'll have a dedicated question and discussion period later in the agenda, so we ask that you please hold your questions until then. For any technical issues, please reference our support guide, which is available on the SLRD website, where you found the link for tonight's meeting. And just a reminder that this session is being recorded, and following the meeting, a link to the video will be shared on the SLRD website. To start off, I'd like to start by introducing the team that is joining us this evening to support this town hall. Maybe I'll ask everyone just to wave quickly when I announce your name. From the SLRD, we have Jen Ford, who's the SLRD board chair, and she'll be joining us in a few minutes. We have Russell Mack, Electoral Area C Director. We have Heather Paul, Chief Administrative Officer. Mike Fusca, Emergency Program Manager. Andrew McFetrich, the Emergency Management Technician for the SLRD, who is also our technical lead for this meeting. From the Lillooet Nation, we have Councillor Troy Bacady. We also have Councillor Maxime Bruce. From the Quaqua, we have Councillor Dennis Silzer-Smith. From Stantec, we have Graham Bass and Graham Nibbs, who will present the flood and geohazard risk assessment update. Also joining us to support the question and discussion period is Dr. Brian Menunos, a glacial scientist from the University of Northern British Columbia and Natural Resources Canada, Jeff Abbott from the Ministry of Transportation and Transit, and Peter Cienciala from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. On the screen, you'll see the agenda for tonight's session. I won't review in detail as we only have 90 minutes and we're wanting to give as much time for questions and discussion. So we'll move directly into our agenda. So we're honored to begin tonight's session with opening words from representatives from the Lillooet Nation. I'll first hand it over to Troy Bacady for first remarks. Over to you, Troy.
Hello, you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, thank you.
I'd like to start with thank you, Creator, for the rain and the snow on all our lands. Thank you for bringing all these good people together to discuss our safety and our good rivers and creeks on this full moon, the first day of our calendar year. I am Troy Bacady, son of Ted and Veronica Bacady, Lillooet. We're on the lands of the Lillooet and the Quaqua. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Troy. I'll now ask Councillor Maxime Bruce, would you like to say a few words?
Thanks everyone so much for being on this call today. I recall when we had to make a decision about the work that was done. Thank you everybody for your support. I think in moving forward, it's just such an amazing relationship that we have going here with this collaboration on the Place Creek and Place Glacier. Unfortunately, with climate change and all of that, it's just such quite an undertaking. But on the more I guess collaborative note, I feel very lucky that we're able to work together, and just over the past few weeks I've worked with Peter of DFO and Northwest Hydraulics on installing the turbidity logger and keep putting some instruments on the reds at for the Birkenhead Chinook. So that is quite an undertaking, and another task has come up about data sharing. And so, yeah, I asked Heather to help me with that. I've never pulled together a data sharing agreement, but I think it's a great opportunity for us to collaborate more. I have a challenging information. When we were going through the experience last year, we had enumerated 39 Birkenhead Chinook salmon. So that's 39. And this year we have counted 15. So 15. So I want to put it out there that's something we need to keep in mind as we work on this Pool Creek system and Glacier Creek. Yeah, and again, thank you everyone for being a part of this collaboration. Yeah, and welcome. And all, I guess, all my appreciation for everyone that's brought it to this place. You know, and Quatquas and Lillooet are very connected. So, yeah. Kukstum Katlap Nifty.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Maxine and Troy, for your partnership, those opening words, and for also grounding tonight's discussion. I would now like to welcome Area C Director Russell Mack to share a few words on behalf of the SLRD board. Over to you, Director Mack. Just give it a moment to get your microphone unmuted. I believe everything's unmuted on our side, so Director Mack, it should be on your side. Few more seconds, then we can always get back to you. Still can't hear you, Director Mack. Okay, well, maybe we'll move on to the next piece and we can come back to you, and maybe Andrew, our technical lead, if you could connect with Director Mack to support him. Perfect. So now I will hand it over to Michael Fusca, the SLRD Emergency Program Manager, who served as the EOC Director during this year's event. Mike will provide an overview of the emergency response and the work completed to date. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, as Mark said, I'm Mike Fusca. I'm the SLRD's Emergency Program Manager, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the traditional and the unceded territory of the Squamish-Lillooet. Thank you all for being here. To begin, I'm going to recap the events of 2024. I'm sure community members will remember on July 21st, 2024, Place Glacier had a rapid draining of water. It was a glacial outburst. There was a lake that had formed in Place Glacier, and then the structure of the glacier broke and rapidly released the water down Place Creek, causing a channel diversion and a debris flood of valley bottom, manifesting in the diverting of water from Pool Creek towards Gates Lake, and causing flooding on multiple properties. So last summer, with funding from the Ministry of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, the SLRD, we contracted Stantec to oversee the correction of this channel back into its normal alignment and alleviate the flooding, and that work was completed in September of 2024. Next slide, please. So bringing us to May of this year, glaciology scientists from Natural Resources Canada advised us that through their research, they had learned that Place Glacier was likely to refill and continue to pose an outburst flood hazard for several years into the future. So with that information, the SLRD, we formally requested that the Ministry of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness and also the Ministry of Waterland and Resource Stewardship take immediate action to protect public safety. Now, the reason we did this is I'll note that the Ministry of Waterland and Resource Stewardship is the provincial land manager for Place Glacier, Place Creek, and Pool Creek. It's also the lead ministry assigned under the Emergency Disaster Management Act that would be responsible for risk assessments and emergency management of landslide and flood hazards on provincially managed land. Next slide, please. So very shortly after we sent that letter, between over the days of June 18th to June 20th, that same lake on Place Glacier, it outburst again, although this time with a lesser magnitude than what was experienced in 2024. At that time, we issued an evacuation alert for properties along Pemberton Portage Road and Pool Creek Road. And then again, with funding from the Ministry of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, we contracted Stantec once again to assess the immediate hazard risk to properties at Valley Bottom and also assess this year's outburst impacts to the emergency work that was constructed following the 2024 outburst event. Next slide, please. On July 11th, Stantec, they completed that initial assessment and advised us at the SLRD that there was no immediate debris flood and debris flow risk emanating from Place Glacier at that time. So we lifted the evacuation alert for properties at Valley Bottom. Later on that month, we received a response to our June 6th letter from the Minister of Waterland and Resource Stewardship, stating that they were aware of the outburst on June 19th and also indicating their support for a broader public safety study of Place Glacier, basically to assess the long-term hazard risk and also propose long-term mitigation options that could protect, into the future. So on a few weeks of working with Stantec to scope out that project on September 12th, the SLRD, we awarded that contract to Stantec to undertake this broader public safety study. This work is going on right now, and results of the study will be available in Q1 of 2026. That's it for the Emergency Operations Center update. Thank you, Mark. Over to you.
Perfect. Thanks for that update, Mike. Director Mack, we'll return to you to share a few words on behalf of the board, if you are able to speak.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
You have some feedback, but we can hear you.
Yeah, what was that? Why would we be getting feedback? I think you should just carry on. Just carry on.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you, Director Mack, and I will just say thank you for your support and leadership. It is very much appreciated. So we will now move into the technical presentation of this evening. Our consultants from Stantec, who have been leading the analysis of the Place Glacier outburst flood event. Tonight, they'll share an overview of the hazard, key findings from the risk assessment, and an update on ongoing and upcoming work. So Graham Vass and Graham Nibbs, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And Andrew, if you can turn on the share function, I can share my presentation. While Andrew's doing that, hello everyone. Hopefully some of you remember us from last year's presentations, but my name is Graham Vass, a senior hydrotechnical engineer with Stantec Consulting. I live in Squamish and I'm out of our Burnaby office. My colleague Graham, we make things confusing by both being named the same. Which one of us spells it correctly? It's a contentious debate there, but I'll pass it over to you, Graham, for an introduction.
Yeah, hey folks. Yeah, thanks, Graham. I appreciate that. Yeah, my name's Graham Nibbs. I reside here on Vancouver Island. Debris flow and landslide specialist here at Stantec. I've had the pleasure of supporting this project and the community here now for a few years. as we move towards mitigation for Place Creek. So Graham, with that, why don't you take it away?
Sure thing. You'll see me looking to the side. That's where my presentation screen is. So I'll try to look back and forth, but let's kick it off. So yeah, this is the Place Creek debris flood and debris flow hazard presentation. I want to give a bit of a background first on what happened in 2024 to elaborate off of Mike's minutes there. And I'll go through the actions of what we did in 2024, 2025, and leading up to basically today. So let's dive back. Okay, here we go. So just a little background to get us acquainted. I know we all know the area, but we have Gates Lake down here. We have Place Creek, which runs down from the Place Glacier up here, all the way down here, goes along here into Pool Creek, and then Pool Creek flows all the way down here, tying into the Birkenhead River. So Gates or Place Glacier located up here. The ice marginal lake is the correct term I've been told by our glaciologist, Brian. I'm just going to call it a glacial lake to keep things a little more simple there. But there's a glacial lake that forms right up here within the glacier itself. It's a depression where runoff at the spring and I guess early summer collects and forms a pool. This pool in 2024 got up to a depth of 30 meters. And here is some more details on that pool. We can see this is aerial imagery from before the event in 2024. There's a lake that's formed here. You can even see icebergs floating in the lake. And then this is immediately following the event where it's fully drained down to bedrock here. So yes, it happened on July 23rd, 2024. And here's a schematic that was provided by Brian, which adds a little more context to what exactly happened. So we have the depression that's formed here. We have the glacier over here. It infills up to a certain point where the pressure is enough to open a conduit underneath the glacier along the rock boundary. The water then comes passing underneath here till it outlets underneath of the glacier. That then flows downstream into Place Creek. So again, we have the glacier here. It outlets somewhere down here and then comes rushing down the mountain towards the Pemberton Plateau. Here's another image of where that lake formed. You can see the depression located here. This is going downstream, so it outletted somewhere around here and then continued its way down the mountain. This is looking up towards the glacier. You can see the fan of material where it came rushing down. Swath of damage as the debris flow and debris flood made its way downstream. Yeah, you can see the damage that occurred to the area as it's progressing downstream. Here are the falls in the box canyon that then come out onto the Pemberton Plateau here. The debris flood event itself caused an avulsion, which is a realignment of the channel. It stopped going down towards Pool Creek. It kicked the flow to the right, cut a new channel through the forested terrain and out through the Pemberton Plateau flats here. Previously, it went this direction here. Now it kicked, or in 2024, it kicked out this way, went along this direction. This is another overhead view looking at that deposited material that filled the old channel and caused this avulsion event to happen and flow be directed down this direction here. And again, this is looking on to the Smolders property where the flow had been diverted going through here and outletting into Gates Lake. This is just a zoom in of the avulsion I was referring to. So we're looking downstream on the left hand. This is the previous alignment. And this was the new alignment that was cutting through the woods. We walked the whole alignment of Place Creek, the new and the old alignment. The flow had been going this direction here into Gates Lake, and the previous alignment had been going this direction here down to Pool Creek. Just some more photos of the event itself, just to give some context to what these things kind of look like. Here's the avulsion route where the flow was just pouring through the woods. And then this is through the hydro right-of-way, where we can see that the flow had formed a channel by, they call it incising or lowering down into the surrounding area to form a channel. Basically, we're looking at the birth of a creek. I'm sure a lot of you saw myself and my colleague, Duncan, wandering through the properties in our waders at this point. We provided immediate emergency response by establishing some bulk bags along the perimeter of the right-of-way here to stop flow from spreading out over the properties and impacting properties down here. We excavated a temporary channel, kicked the flow into that channel and redirected it, well, consolidated it towards the lake here while we were developing the larger response plan. This was a proposal to come in and basically excavate out the old alignment and reestablish the embankment along, we call it the river right, so looking downstream on the right-hand side embankment here to block the avulsion and have flow go back through its pre-event alignment. You can just see some schematics of what it was. Basically cut a channel in here, take some of this material to reestablish the embankment, and then we sourced boulders from the deposited material to provide some bank protection for this whole reestablished embankment. This is what it looked like originally when we were walking through the woods. The old channel itself had filled in. It was kind of hard to necessarily specify where exactly it had once been. And then here are some photos of the construction itself. So we reestablished an alignment through the woods. Here, we excavated out the channel over here. We then took some boulders from the channel and created, they call it riprap or bank protection along the river right bank here. Once this was fully complete, we then plugged the avulsion hole, kicked flow back into the new channel, and it looked something like this. This is looking upstream at the upstream extent. This is basically staying on where the avulsion had been. We continued to reestablish the embankment to tie into the high ground here and place these boulders all the way up to this point here. And this is looking downstream at the works here. You can see that flow is already starting to cut into the deposited material through here to reform basically a channel that you would see in this situation before a debris flood happened. So that was all in 2024. Mike gave the background on what led up to June 18th, but from June 18th to June 20th, a similar event occurred in that same depression as before. The only major difference here was that it was about half the depth. I believe it was about 15 meters rather than 30 meters when the conduit reopened and the flow all drained out. Here's another angle. This is downstream going this direction. You can see the remnants of the lake that formed and then what it was at. I think this was about on the 20th when they went up to review it. So Stantec was retained to come and do an assessment to see how the emergency works had held up from the event itself. So here are some before and after photos. The photos on the right are post 2024 reestablishment. And then the photos on the left are following the 2025 outburst event. So the upstream section fared quite well where it tied in. There was some mobilization of boulders along the toe, but the majority of the bank itself was still quite well established. You can see that the channel has cut back down into the deposited material further. It looks like it's now back down to potentially where it had been prior to the 2024 event. This is where the damage was noted. This is just looking downstream of the previous avulsion point. We can see on the right, this is what it looked like with riprap going along the bank here. Following the event, we can see here that the riprap in this little section had been undermined and has been mobilized. This then caused erosion of that reestablished embankment further back here with about 2 meters of crest width located up here, but about 10 to 11 meters worth of material along the base from this point to the old avulsion channel there. Potentially what had happened is as it was cutting back down through the material, some wood that had either been there before or got caught up during the debris flood event in 2024 was re-exposed, causing a bit of a block. This then would have forced flow to impinge or be forced up against the right bank, which potentially undermined the riprap at that location, causing the loss of material and the retreat of the bank at this point. This is looking upstream from downstream. This was that photo from before of the reestablished channel. We can see following the event, it plugged back up. So all that material that came down from the outburst event filled the channel to the point where there wasn't necessarily a whole lot of a channel exposed there. What had happened as a result here, though, is that the flow is now kicked over in this direction. There's a very high, basically mountain wall at this point. So the flow is just redirected along the toe of that high mountain wall coming around here and then going back into the channel that was excavated in 2024. What we did after this was what we call a quantitative hazard assessment. So you might be wondering, what is the difference between the assessment we did in 2024 compared to this assessment? 2024 was really emergency driven. It was fast paced with limited time available and limited resources. So in 2024, what we did was a visual, they call it qualitative hazard assessment, where we assessed it to see what is the hazards of leaving the channel in its post-event alignment. We used that to then go in there and do these emergency works, which were field-driven, very quick response with limited time available to address the hazards that were posed by the approaching fall rains and also the approaching salmon cohort of the Birkenhead River. So the quantitative assessment is a much more in-depth assessment where we look at LIDAR, recently collected surveys following the event compared to pre, or I guess post our emergency works in 2024 surveys to see what happened, and then also to develop a hydraulic model where we can then simulate outburst event flows coming down the mountain into the communities and assess what is the hazard associated with that. The end goal of this assessment at that point was to create hazard maps to say, based on projected water depths and water velocities, what is that associated hazard and how does that impact the community? So at the first step, we looked at a LIDAR or a survey comparison of following the event to immediately following the 2024 emergency works. The blue is where erosion or loss of material is. The red is where deposition or more material being placed happened. A lot of these areas over here, this is just background noise from trees and some slight differences there. The key area is looking along the channel itself here. So that first point I showed you where the bank had eroded away there, you can see it's evidenced by the blue here. It's showing that there's erosion in these areas, loss of material here. And then where we saw that deposition, that's the red areas here. So that material was coming down the mountain, deposited within this transitional area where we go from the steep mountains to the shallower Pemberton Plateau. And there was more deposition within that area here, but then moving downstream, there wasn't a lot of material that deposited following the event itself. The one area that wasn't captured in those photos earlier was at the furthest downstream section of the reestablished embankment. The embankment itself blew back out at this location here. Flow just kind of went through the trees and then back into the channel at this location here. So there was another lost material point down here, and that's what this downstream erosion site is referring to. So the next step was looking at debris flow. It gets kind of confusing, debris flow, debris flood, clear water flood. So I'll give a quick one on debris flood and clear water, and then Graham, I'm going to pass it over to you. But clear water is basically just clear water. There's some fines collected in the flow, but it's mainly just the flow from whatever is up there, the rainfall event coming down the channel. A debris flood event happens on steep terrain where that flood flow actually picks up sediment, boulders, material like that. This causes the flow to, they call bulk. Or if you picture a bathtub and I throw in a bunch of sediment and boulders and stuff, it's going to overflow, right? I've now increased that volume. The same thing goes for the flow. Perhaps I had this much flow coming down. When I pick up all the material, now I have that much flow coming down the river. So it causes more flow to come down. Debris flow is different. And then Graham, you take it over.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Yeah, it's nuanced, and as geoscientists, we typically look at the transition from a debris flow, which is a landslide hazard, so gravitationally driven, and this translation into a flood hazard that Graham Vass is looking at. And this is the more hazard that was experienced by the general public in the lower elevations of the mountain. No less, though, if we were to flip back to the earlier slides that Graham had shown, where you don't have to flip back, Graham, but where the initial outburst event evacuated out of the glacial cirque, or the hanging valley up at the top, we could see a lot of that excavation was entrained through those floodwaters, and those will translate through as a landslide or a debris flow, which is a really rapid, highly saturated slurry of debris that's going to be moving down the mountain. So what we did to quantitatively assess the hazard from landslides in this area is we did something called a landslide hazard fingerprint. We used Stantec's debris flow predictor model, which provides probabilistic results, which means that we can run various scenarios through the model space, and it provides a likelihood through our analysis of where inundation from landslide hazard may occur. And this can also be used to help inform the flood hazard as well. But if we look, the picture on the left is a little bit easier to interpret here. Something to consider when you look at these, it's not so much that all of these landslides are going to initiate at once, but we've run them through different sub-scenarios to identify where on the landscape the most likely area of landslide inundation will occur. Lo and behold, the large hazard that we identified through this process is that it's actually flood hazard inundating the fan here. Landslide hazards tend to terminate higher up on the fan relative to that. We can see here on the right image, we've actually gone through and corrected it for the initiation likelihood outside of glacial outburst events, and those are well beyond approvable limits. They're fractional hazards in that area due to landslides. So, long story short, the landslide hazard here is relatively contained to unpopulated areas and not intersecting receptors that we were assessing for this assessment. And yeah, Graham, when I flip it back to you then.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So from my side, from the flood hazard, what we did is we developed a two-dimensional hydraulic model that extended from the Hanging Valley or the Cirque Lake. They're basically those lakes that were below the glacier, all the way down the steep terrain of Place Creek out into the fan. We also captured Pool Creek, where the two come together, and then extended along Pool Creek until it reconnects up with Birkenhead River here. On top of this, we looked at we call it a discrete or like a local model at that avulsion point. So we wanted to see, was there an immediate hazard from a debris flood event in the fall with these large rains that generally occur at this time of year based on the current eroded bank. So we assessed what a 200-year flood event would be. And again, on terminology, a 200-year event is just a probability term. It's the equivalent of saying, what is the annual exceedance probability or the probability of an event occurring every single, like in any given year of 0.5%. So a AEP, or the percentage of an event happening in any given year of 0.5% is the same as a 200-year return period event. So we looked at what that would be like coming through the existing channel with the damage that's occurred to the works in 2024. And that's where we developed came to the conclusion that there was a very low probability of these events posing a potential to re-establish that avulsion channel and project that flood risk down to the community around Gates Lake. Then we looked at the larger model to see what is the potential hazards associated with a 200-year Clearwater event, a 200-year debris flood event, and also the 2025 outburst event to see how they all compared and what the hazards potentially posed to the downstream community were. We generated these called hazard maps. The big thing is these are much different than flood maps. Flood maps require a very much larger scope of work where you have to do detailed bathymetry or survey of the channel bed for the entire extent. It's a very, very detailed process with legislated requirements that go along with it. This one is called hazard maps. So what they do is they take our model results, they take the hydraulics associated with them, like the depth and the velocity, and they generate these hazards ratings. The hazard ratings have different rankings. Like it's H1 through H5, and H1, they say generally safe for people, vehicles, and buildings. H2, unsafe for small vehicles. H3, unsafe for vehicles, children, and the elderly. 4, unsafe for people and vehicles. 5, unsafe for vehicles and people, all buildings vulnerable to structural damage, some less robust types vulnerable to failure. And then H6, unsafe for vehicles and people, all building types considered vulnerable for failure. And that's the red color there. So the flood maps we ran again for those 3 scenarios, all with the 200-year return period events. And the big thing, well, the thing with all of them was they all had very similar results. And the important thing to take away from that was that this 2025 outburst event, which was a half-full glacier lake, had similar hazards as a 200-year return period flood event. The connection there is that a 200-year return flood event has a 0.5% happening in any given year. This outburst event is anticipated to occur in some capacity until the glacier retreats significantly enough that that pool doesn't form anymore. So there's a high probability of this event occurring in basically any given year until that glacier is receded sufficiently. The results itself, though, we had for the private lands between Gramsons and Birkin that are adjacent to Pool Creek are exposed to flood hazards during the event. However, the higher level hazard areas are contained within the creek banks, and the floodplains are generally safe for people, vehicles, and buildings. So this means that there is a hazard within the creek banks itself. There is some flooding on the overbanks and the floodplains. However, the depths and the velocities associated with that don't pose a significant hazard to people and structures. The area immediately upstream of the Pool Creek Road culvert, which is located around here, is exposed to higher hazard levels, and that poses unsafe conditions for people and vehicles within the area immediately upstream of the culvert being vulnerable to structural damage. So we can see in these areas, there's the potential for hazards posed to people and vehicles. And then the area right here that's immediately upstream of the culvert, there's hazard to structures. And so what is Stantec doing right now? We're in phase 2 of the project. We're taking the results from this first phase, and we're looking at what is the potential hazard associated with the 2024 event or the full Glacier Lake. We're going to be creating flood maps similar to what we did here with those results there. And we're also going to be running some additional lake levels to help inform SLRD's emergency response protocols. Along with that, we're looking at what are some potential mitigations that would potentially address the hazard, both at the Glacier Lake itself and down in the valley. So we're exploring options there. Another option that we're looking at as well is whether repairing the 2024 emergent responses should be pursued rather than these other options that I'm talking about there. And then the main one too is the emergency preparedness planning. And yeah, that brings me to the end of my update. I'm sure I ran over 15 minutes, Mike. Sorry about that, but I will pass it back to you and Mark.
Perfect. Thank you, Graham. And Graham, I appreciate the update and for walking us through that important and detailed work. So next we'll hear from the SLRD board chair, Jem Ford, and our emergency program manager, Mike Fusca, who will speak to the SLRD's efforts related to provincial advocacy and SLRD readiness in regards to the potential spring 2026 outburst flooding. So Chair Ford, I will hand it over to you next.
Okay, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Thank you everyone for taking the time.
Oh, seem to have muted you, or you seem to be muted.
How about now?
Perfect.
Is that better? Okay.
Yes.
I don't know how that happened. Okay, so I was saying thank you to everyone who's taken the time to be here today to hear from all of the experts in this field. This is a really challenging space for us, given that this requires a lot of collaboration between different orders of government. We have been no stranger to emergencies in this region. We're often called the region with all of the hazards. And that is not lost on us. It's something that our team takes extremely seriously. So when it comes to working with the provincial government, especially in this case, we've got 3 different ministries that need to work together to support us as a small regional government, but to support the homeowners in this area. And so this is, we've been lucky to have funding from the province to help us do this work, to do this mitigation work, and to understand the threats that could potentially come as we go forward and as the climate continues to change. So this is something I've met with each of the ministers on many times, not only in this case, but in similar scenarios in other parts of the regional district. We've had landslides within this area recently through the atmospheric river events of 2021, and some homeowners that were impacted pretty extremely after 2021. So working through this is unfortunately becoming a little bit more common to our team. And so we are very well served by the staff that we've got on our team, and really good collaboration with the provincial ministry staff to continue to fund and to continue to do this work together. We will continue to have these conversations with the political orders of government, both at the province and at the federal government. Patrick Weiler is well aware of all of the things that are happening here. None of this falls within his jurisdiction that I know of. But certainly Ministers Kelly Green, Minister Jody Wicken, and Minister Ravi Parmar of Ministry of Forests, all of these organizations need to work together, and they do. And so I wanted to share on behalf of the board that you we have a lot of support here. We have a lot of work to do, and the board is here to support you as homeowners. You're certainly welcome to call me, email me. All of my details are available. And I look forward to hearing from you if you have comments or questions. I also want to wrap up by saying how immensely grateful we are to Maxine Bruce for the advocacy that she put forward immediately after the first flow, and all of the work that Lillooet Nation has put into this in supporting us to understand the importance of this waterway, of the food security, and of the resilience of the various species of fish and all of the ecosystems in the area. And so it really is a whole team effort here, and I'm very, very grateful to everyone on this call today for the support that we've had, and we look forward to further work. I think that's all I wanted to say on that. I'll turn it back over to you, Mark. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chair Ford, for your support and those words. I'll now hand it to Mike Fusca to talk about SLRD readiness for the spring.
Thank you, Mark. And yeah, thank you, Chair Ford, for those comments. I can echo those. At a staff level, we are receiving a lot of support. And in addition to our friends at Lillooet Nation who've been supporting us, I think it's also important to recognize Dr. Brian Menunos at Natural Resource Canada and Jeff Crompton, both at NRCan and UNBC, so they're glacier scientists who are supporting us on this, and also Peter Cinchala at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, who has also been advising us as well. So the burning question in everyone's mind, I'm sure, is what's next? So we know that Place Glacier is likely to pose an outburst hazard for several years to come, and the work we're doing now is going to help inform what we can do about it. When Stantec completes their current project and they present the mitigation options to us in January, February, at that point, we can have productive conversations about what the most appropriate solution might be. But that foundation work needs to be done. The most important thing to remember right now is that whatever's decided, it will be decided with enough time to implement before the next hazard period. And by that I mean the next time the glacier is expected to have an outburst, which would be in June or July 2026. So that's where we are. Thank you, Mark.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. So we now want to open the floor for your questions and discussion. So we have representatives from the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District, Stantec, University of Northern British Columbia, Ministry of Transportation and Transit, and Department of Fisheries and Oceans available to respond. maybe I'll just stop for 1 second. Maxime, I see your hand is up if you have a comment.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I guess the one thing that really caught my attention is the limitations around the funding. And, don't get me wrong, I think the provincial government was very, very helpful in getting us to this point. And thank you very much to the Stantec for doing what you did. I guess my thoughts are around here we have an opportunity now where we're definitely talking about safety of homes, but we're also I guess, how do we open our minds to moving forward? So what comes to my mind is over the past few years, actually past few decades, we've been conducting coho salmon surveys on Pool Creek. And so that is, and thank you, Jen Ford, for mentioning food security. That is significant. Salmon is a keystone. So I'm, when I spoke to this matter, when it happened, it was very concerning to me, impacting the Birkenhead Chinook salmon, reduced with the water not flowing back to the Birkenhead. It would, I was concerning that the temperature would go up and the depth of the river. And yeah, like I said, we've been conducting coho salmon surveys on Pool Creek for some time, and now we have this big channel, which is, it is saving homes, but how are we contributing back to the salmon? I just felt now we have a great opportunity to revisit things and start to create more coho salmon habitat. Also taking a look at this, and I'm not coming empty-handed. I'm thinking that because we're the Lillooet Nation and we are linked to the federal government, I think that we have a lot of potential to access funding for these kind of purposes. At this time, I'm putting a motion together for the Sport Fish Advisory Committee to support me support the Lillooet Nation in our efforts to rebuild the Chinook salmon stocks on the Birkenhead. So I don't know what that really means. I'm trying to cast a big net as best I can, because I don't think this is going to be the end of it until, that glacier has definitely melted. So I'm just trying to open it up there to see what, all of us in a true collaboration, what can we bring to this to resolve these matters that have been that are in front of us. So that's my thoughts, and I don't think it's a question, but it perhaps is. How are we going to move forward? Kukstum Katlap Nifty.
Perfect. Thank you, Maxime, for those comments. And I think that is, us working together in the partnership that we've had throughout this with yourselves, the Naquaqua, and our partners at DFO and in the province is critical. And I think your advocacy and that holistic approach to it beyond public safety is critical to our going forwards. Before we open it to everyone's questions, I'll just kind of outline or kind of give a quick overview how we'll be using Teams. So we will ask that you please use the raise the hand function, which you already are, and you'll be put in the queue. Your microphone will be unmuted by our technical lead. Please make sure that you also unmute your microphone on your side. You can also use the Q&A function to type a question by using the Q&A button in the menu bar. And again, if you need any further technical guidance, please go to our website where we have our guide. And we'll move on to our next question. Mr. Don Coggins.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm unmuted now. There seems to be a line of demarcation at the bridge at Pool Creek Road. In other words, the problem is upstream of that and there doesn't be any problem downstream of that. Does that mean there's a restriction at that level or at that particular point?
Graham, that's me on to you to answer that question.
Yeah, sure thing. The evidence from our site inspection and the modeling would be indicating that the culvert is undersized for these peak events. What you can see is downstream of it, there's blown out eroded banks, sort of sloughing of the riprap armor there. And upstream of it, you can see that there's they call it backwatering, and then deposition of fine material on the overbanks. So these two observations and just what you noticed in the maps as well would be indicative of an undersized culvert. And one option there to improve things would be potential replacement of the culvert with a larger structure. Yeah.
Can I ask a secondary question? If that was cleared, would you then have a secondary blockage at where the Pool Creek crosses the highway?
That's a great question. And I would be very curious to explore that more, because there are two bridges downstream of there. There's the Pemberton Portage Road Bridge, and then there's the CN Road Bridge below that, or downstream, immediately downstream of that. So certainly I would be curious, and for any replacement of the culvert, we would have to look at the transfer risk. So if we pulled that out, are we actually shifting risk downstream to the road crossing? And then you'd have to do an assessment there to make sure that those existing structures have capacity to be handling it, and we're not just passing the buck somewhere else.
Last question. If the water flows free to the Birkenhead, can the Birkenhead handle it in a normal 200-year event?
That's another good question. We would have to do the modeling for that as well. I mean, the Birkenhead is like an order of magnitude larger. So it seemed to handle those flood events well until the Pool Creek was basically emptied of flow. But yeah, further modeling would be required to confirm that. And any replacement options that we're talking about here would have to do that sort of due diligence to make sure we're not shifting a risk to the Birkenhead and also to the salmon stock.
Well, I agree with Maxine. We've seen salmon back in Pool Creek. I live right on Pool Creek, and we've started to see them in the last year or two, which is kind of nice. We saw them when we first came here in 2016, but they disappeared, and now they're coming back. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll ask, we have our partners from the Ministry of Transportation Transit here. Maybe I'll ask Jeff Abbott or Michael Braun if you have any comments in regards to that question.
Yeah, hi, Jeff Abbott here. Actually, Graham, I have a question for you. Reading through the report there, it says that in the modelling, the terrain was modified to remove culverts and bridges along Pool Creek other than the Pool Creek Road culvert. Are you able to speak to that decision?
Yeah, the rationale for that was just the complexity and our established scope. There are smaller culverts upstream where Pool Creek comes into the Place Creek, the confluence between the two. So to improve modeling time and conduct the hazard assessments, that's why those were pulled out of it. Approaching the bridge itself, that is the one where there had been a historical evidence of capacity issues. To incorporate every single small culvert in the study would take a large amount of additional survey and basically orders of magnitude of more budget than what was available to do this study. So for hazard level assessment and based on our walking through of the site and noticing culverts and bridges that may pose further hazard assessments, this was the best way forward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was curious when I read that because it seemed like if we take out all the potential complications and bottlenecks bar one, then that's going to show up as a bottleneck. But what you said there makes sense. And the things that we're seeing on site do kind of indicate towards some size limitations under certain conditions. In terms of where we are at the moment, we appreciate SLRD sending this on to us. We're still coming back from the strike action recently, so things are still gearing up. We've had a preliminary look at it with a few people, and we need to look into it some more. And one issue that was raised was our decision for what to do with this culvert being somewhat dependent on what is happening further upstream, like SLRD or whichever agency's decision on how to manage the avulsion pathway and the water flow upstream, kind of determining what's going to be arriving at the Pool Creek Road culvert. So slightly linked to that, well, strongly linked to that, should I say. So yeah, we're aware and we're reviewing, and we're kind of waiting to hear more about what comes out of this.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff, for being here tonight and for those comments, and your partnership in terms of making sure that we are ready for spring 2026 is critical. So thank you for being here, and looking forward to working with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have any other questions? No questions in the Q&A? Maybe just I will just open the floor. We do have other experts. We have Peter here and also Brian, but actually just saw another question come up, and I'll hand it over to you, maybe Peter and Brian to speak after. But Mr. Rick King, over to you. Oh, hold on 1 second. Just make sure Andrew, he's unmuted, and Rick, you've unmuted yourself. No. Maybe Rick will give you a moment. Hopefully we can figure out your microphone. And we have another question. Cheryl Griffin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. So we're a little bit higher up here at Gates Lake, so we did experience some of the outflow issues, and really thankful for all the work that guys did initially and how quickly you got things sorted out, which was great. I did want to just make a comment or just put a thought in people's heads. There's talk about we won't have a problem when the glacier is gone and significantly receded, both for taking away from the Pool Creek line. But I guess it makes, it begs the question, what are we doing about the glacier receding? Because actually probably don't want it to recede. And I don't know if we have like climate people on this call or DFO is on this call, but I think maybe it's bringing that question up for us that we really need to think about, because when the glacier is gone, the fish aren't going to be able to come up either. So just anybody thinking about that? Have we brought people in to talk about that? Do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, certainly. Maybe Dr. Brian Menonos.
Hi, thanks, Mark. And hello, everyone. I'm calling in from the unceded territory, the Lillooet, where I live and play and call home in Prince George. So Cheryl, that's a great question. So in British Columbia, we have something like 17,000 individual glaciers. And as many of us know, they are responding to and have responded in the last several decades to climate change. And it is actually, unfortunately, being caused by rising greenhouse gases. Site-to-site basis, if the glacier is small enough, there are some examples from Switzerland, for example, where you may be able to shroud or cover those glaciers, but it's very difficult to do this for thousands and thousands of glaciers. But I would recommend, as a university professor, thinking about not if but when are these glaciers going to go? And really thinking about resiliency in terms of thermal regulation. And so, that's something we could perhaps all talk about at a later point. But those are things that really have to be starting to be taken into consideration, at least. Geohazards are happening, but we also have to be thinking about ways that we can simultaneously address mitigating those hazards, but also perhaps having a more resilient environment going forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. Heather, do you have any comments you'd like to share?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Sound clear.
Okay. I thank you, Cheryl, for asking that question. And I just wanted to share, when we were at UBCM meeting with the Ministry of Environment, we did raise that. First, we were talking about this issue, and like Chair Forr said, SLRD is a bit of a canary in the coal mine. We're talked about across Canada. If it's going to happen, it might happen here first, likely. And so the last thing that was raised, most importantly, was that question you asked yourself, and I'm proud to say that was raised by the elected officials that sit on the SLRD board. So that is front of mind, both when it comes to discussing this on response, but also mitigating and having that front of mind when making all decisions when it comes to sitting at the board. And it's part of the regional growth strategy and the strategic priorities of the board. So I'm glad you raised that, and I'm glad to be able to say that when we talk about this, we also say, what about preventing this in the first place, and how do we respond to that climate change that's happening? So thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Rick, any chance you got your microphone working? Nope. You're welcome to put your question in the Q&A if you wish as well. Any other questions? Maybe Peter, I don't know if you have any comments you'd like to share as well.
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Peter Chinchilla. I'm a senior science advisor with Climate Emergency Response Unit, which is a part of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And so, as probably most of you are very well aware, Buchanan River is a really important salmon system. And we have been working very closely with SLRD, Stantec, the Lillooet Nation, and other partners to try to respond to those recent events. And again, I want to thank Mike and Mark for inviting me to this meeting. And so right after the 2024 event, we partnered with Lillooet Nation, and we conducted a rapid assessment of the situation from the point of view of fish habitat, and potential impact. And after SLRD took the initiative to address the situation from the point of view of flooding emergency, DFO assessed that there's a net benefit to fish from that action. And so we were more kind of in the role of observers. But we do carry out now ongoing monitoring. And this is a big thank you here to Maxine and the Lillooet Nation, who have allowed us on their territory and are working with us very closely. So what we're doing is we, as Maxine mentioned at some point, we installed secured funding and installed turbidity logger that will be recording. Essentially, it's a piece of equipment, for those of you who are not familiar, that measure how cloudy the water is. So how much of that fine sediment, suspended sediment, is in the water column at any given point. So that is right now probably should be up and running, and soon we're going to have data feed. So the consultants are working to make it all happen as we speak. And so that will tell us how much sediment spewed out by that glacial flood is taken downstream. And for those of you who are not very familiar with salmon ecology, just one of the main concerns that we have from salmon point of view is that if there's excess of that fine sediment, it will settle out into the spawning gravels, will clog them and cut off, or at least reduce the supply of oxygenated flow to the eggs, which would increase mortality of salmon. And so from that point of view, we are looking again, how much of that suspended sediment is in the water. We are also on the ground monitoring how much of it is in fact settling down to the stream bed. And also we have installed some loggers that are looking specifically at the concentration of dissolved oxygen in spawning gravels. So we are looking at that whole kind of chain of cause effect chain from, again, how much sediment is there and how it's likely affecting the fish. And so that is, we expect to continue that for the next few months as it kind of coincides with fish incubation period. So that's where the eggs are in the gravels and turning into juvenile fish. And so we expect to conclude with some sort of recommendation, whether it is a major problem or is it something that maybe is likely to be a relatively minor problem that is likely to clear itself out, at least for now. And so that kind of assessment is going to basically inform the further steps that DFO might take. So if anyone has any questions about details, I'm happy to provide those. But again, I want to emphasize the huge help from Lillooet and great collaboration with SLRD. So thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Peter. Rick, I think you have a message to yourself to Heather Paul has offered to take a phone call from you so we can get your question in the queue. So you're welcome to give her a call if you're able. Any other questions? Maxine, I saw you had your hand up. No. Jeff Abbott, over to you.
Yeah, I'm just curious if we have any of the residents from Pool Creek Road on the line.
I believe so. This session is for the residents of the area, and a number of questions we've been receiving are from residents.
But specifically from adjacent to the culvert.
Don
put his hand up. Is that where you live, Don?
Yes, we're about 3 properties in from the culvert. There's between us and the culvert, there's Rick King, and then I'm sorry, I forget the last person's name. Rick. So both Rick and I were flooded quite extensively in the last 2 events. So
okay,
that's kind of makes me ask the question if that's the choke point.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious because I haven't heard from that side of things. So I was curious to understand what the feeling from the ground was for the residents there. But you've already asked some questions. I just didn't realize that was you. So
no problem. You. And I suspect that that's what Rick's questions are about too. So.
Yeah. I was out there yesterday and had a look around, and I'm not sure who the owner is, but the property closest to Pool Creek and the culvert there, it looks like they don't really use the lower part, so I wasn't sure whether they kind of expect that to flood or it's just how things turned out. Anyway, it was mostly for my own curiosity about how the closest residents felt about the whole situation.
Perfect. Thank you, Don, for that. And Jeff, I think if there's if there's any, we'd love to hear comments from the people in the area that we would be happy to convey them to you, Jeff, as well.
Thanks.
All right. Heather.
Thank you, Mark. I haven't been able to reach Rick or Rich reach me, but I also want to say it's not over with this when this meeting's over, and there's a lot of people that we can contact. So Rick, we can send you some contact information on how to reach us, and we'll get anybody on this call to answer your questions if you need it. So with that, let's not let technology get in the way of us asking each other questions. So
Exactly. Great point, Heather. Leave it open. Don, I'm assuming that's a hand from before. Perfect.
Yes, it was. It was just so I could answer Jeff's question.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Don. All right, with that, as Heather said, you're always available for questions and we'll share our contact information. We'll get the slide back up. But I'd just like to say a sincere thank you to all of you for your time tonight, your questions, and your ongoing engagement. And I will hand it over to CAO Heather Paul for closing remarks and closing the meeting.
Thanks, Mark. I feel like I sat here and was listening to some great contribution from experts in the field, but also I want to recognize that the people living in this area are also experts in the field and they see and know everything that's happening. Hearing stories of watching the salmon come back, hearing your overall experiences of the floods and the years and years of experience here, and also just recognizing the Kwakwa being on this call and the thousands of years of experience they have caring for the territory, and Lillooet as well. I want to acknowledge and celebrate those thousands of years and the knowledge that has been passed down from generation to generation. I hear great stories of the salmon, and I also see great progress in recognizing that when we watch the ecology, when we watch the salmon, we also get signs of what's to come and what's happening in the future. And that can tell us how to care for everything from the environment around us to our driveways and homes and our backyards and the place that we so love and revere. I want to thank the ministries for being here. Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, Ministry of Transit and Transportation. Jeff, great to see you, quote unquote. Department of Fisheries and Oceans. It's so nice that when this first call happened over a year ago, Peter is here still on this call and he hasn't moved and he's been on this same file. Same with Stantec. These are the same people that have been here since the moment it happened, and I like to see that. All the new faces from Natural Resources Canada and UNBC. There's some familiar names and very smart people watching this, and I appreciate that. I want to recognize how hard it is to bring all of these people together, and that's the work of the SLRD staff that you see on this call, Mark and Mike and Andrew, and a lot of people behind the scenes that just make this call happen. Technically getting this ready and gathering, I'm going to tell you, getting staff and ministries and everyone together all in one place at one time isn't easy. So I commend the team for doing that, and I commend the board for supporting both the emergency readiness and response that we have at the SLRD, but also their thoughtful decisions and supporting this events like this and collaborative mitigating the advocacy that happens by the staff to the province is also appreciated. Instead of saying, what do we do every year when this happens, there's really progressive conversations of how do we mitigate it in the long term and how do we prevent it for future glaciers. So thank you very much. There's contacts up there on your screen, but you can take a picture of it or you can just go to our website, info@slrd.bc.ca. We'll also get you anywhere you need to go. And I'm also here to answer any questions and help you. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone taking the time today. And Russell, Mac, wish we could have heard your voice. Really appreciate you being here. And thank you. Thank you to everyone. Kukstum kalp.
Good evening and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.